The first red flag was the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, with a navy and gold logo that looked like it belonged to a country club. Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. The letter inside demanded $12,400 in delinquent dues, 4 years of fees, for a house I had owned for exactly 6 months. I stared at it for a second, then laughed hard. Because here is the thing. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I had just bought a foreclosed farmhouse on 8 acres of Virginia countryside. The house was built in the 1920s, a 2-story wooden structure with a wraparound porch and a barn out back that had seen better decades. The previous owners had let it fall into disrepair before the bank took it. I got it at auction for less than what most people pay for a new truck. It needed new plumbing, new wiring, and about 6 months of sweat equity. But the bones were good. The land was quiet. And after 15 years of reviewing insurance claims in a cubicle, quiet was exactly what I was looking for. Before I bid, I had done what I always do: title search, plat maps, county records. The property came back clean. No liens, no covenants, no HOA. Fee, simple, absolute. The farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel road, separated from the nearest subdivision by a creek and a line of oak trees that had been standing since before my grandmother was born. That subdivision was Meadowbrook Estates, a development of identical beige houses with manicured lawns and decorative mailboxes, built about 15 years ago on what used to be farmland. The boundary between their property and mine was clear on every map I had seen. It ended at the creek. My farmhouse had existed for 4 decades before its first foundation was poured. We were neighbors only in the loosest geographic sense, so when I stood in my driveway holding that letter, my first reaction was amusement. My second was suspicion. I looked at the envelope again. The postmark was dated 2 days ago, but the signature inside was dated 3 weeks earlier. That gap bothered me, if this was legitimate. Why sit on it for 3 weeks before mailing? The logo was slightly blurry, like it had been printed on a home inkjet rather than professional letterhead. The return address listed a property management company called Pinnacle Community Services. The tone was formal, almost threatening. Late fees, interest charges, the possibility of a lien if payment was not received within 30 days. This was not a friendly reminder. This was designed to scare someone into paying without asking questions. I set the letter on my kitchen table and pulled out my deed. There it was, recorded with the county, stamped, and notarized. No mention of any homeowners association, no restrictive covenants, no annexation agreement. Nothing that gave Meadowbrook Estates or anyone else the right to charge me $1. This was not a billing error. This was either spectacular incompetence or something deliberate. Either way, I was not going to write a check and hope it went away. The next morning, I walked down the road to visit my nearest neighbor, an old man named Earl Patterson who had lived on his 10 acres since before Meadowbrook was built. Earl was in his 70s, a retired electrician with a workshop full of tools and a deep suspicion of anything that came with an HOA logo. I showed him the letter. He squinted at it, then handed it back with a grunt. "They sent me one of those a few years back," he said. "I threw it in the trash, figured they were fishing." I asked him if anyone else had received similar letters. He shrugged. There was talk. A widow up the road. Maybe a couple who just moved in. I do not know if they paid. He paused. "You should check with the county. If their HOA had any claim on your land, it would be recorded." That was exactly what I planned to do. Before I left, Earl mentioned one more thing. A few weeks after I moved in, he had seen a woman in a silver SUV drive slowly past my farmhouse, stop at the end of my driveway, and take pictures with her phone. He did not think much of it at the time. Now it seemed worth remembering. I thanked him and walked back home. The letter was still sitting on my kitchen table. I photographed it, front and back, noted the date and time I received it, and filed it with my deed and title documents. Tomorrow I would visit the county recorder and find out exactly what Meadowbrook Estates thought they owned. Someone was either very confused or very confident that I would not bother to verify their claims. They were about to learn otherwise. 1 week later, a second envelope arrived, same cream-colored paper, same navy and gold logo. But this time, the words across the top were printed in bold red ink. Final notice before lien filing. I opened it standing at my mailbox, scanning the contents before I even walked back to the house. The tone had shifted from demanding to threatening. It stated that my failure to respond to the previous notice constituted acknowledgement of the debt. I almost laughed. That is not how contract law works. Silence is not consent. And a bill you never agreed to does not become valid just because you ignored it. But they were counting on people not knowing that. The letter claimed interest was now accruing at 18% annually, bringing the total to $13,200, and if payment was not received within 14 days. Meadowbrook Estates HOA would file a lien against my property. The letter was signed by Monica Vance, Property Management Director at Pinnacle Community Services. I did not panic. I did not call the number listed on the letter. I got in my truck and drove to the county recorder's office. The office was a low brick building downtown, staffed by 2 clerks who looked like they had been processing deeds since the Carter administration. I explained what I needed: the recorded plat map for Meadowbrook Estates, any covenants filed by their HOA, and the title history for my property. The clerk disappeared into the back room and returned 15 minutes later with a stack of documents and a microfiche printout. The plat map confirmed everything I suspected. Meadowbrook Estates covered 127 lots, approved by the county in 2009. The eastern boundary followed the natural line of the creek, the same creek that separated their development from my farmhouse. My property was not inside that boundary. The HOA's recorded covenants applied only to lots within the approved plat. No annexation agreement, no amendment expanding their jurisdiction. I asked the clerk to verify what I was seeing. She compared the documents to her computer records and nodded. "Your property is not within the boundaries of that HOA," she said. "They have no recorded authority over it. If they are claiming you owe dues, they would need to show a covenant attached to your deed or an annexation filed with this office. Neither exists." I requested certified copies of everything. She stamped each document with the county seal and handed them to me in a manila envelope. Before I left, I asked one more question. Had anyone else come in with similar concerns about this HOA? The clerk hesitated, then glanced at her colleague. "I cannot discuss other people's business," she said carefully. "But if you talk to some of the folks who live north of the creek, you might find you are not the only one asking questions." It was not an answer, but it was enough. Earl had mentioned a widow and a couple who might have received similar letters. Now the county clerk was hinting at the same thing. This was not a one-time mistake. There was a pattern forming. That evening, I drafted a formal response, addressed to both Meadowbrook Estates HOA and Pinnacle Community Services, sent via certified mail with return receipt requested. The letter stated that I had reviewed the county records and confirmed my property was not within their jurisdiction. It requested documented proof of their legal authority, including any recorded covenant or annexation agreement. It gave them 10 business days to respond, and it informed them that further collection attempts without such documentation would be reported to the appropriate state agencies. I photographed everything, filed the originals, and drove to the post office to watch the clerk stamp my envelope with a tracking number. 10 days. That was how long they had to prove their case. I already knew they could not, but I wanted their silence on record. I wanted a paper trail showing that I had asked for evidence and received none. The county had confirmed the truth. Now I was giving them a chance to admit it or dig themselves deeper. Based on that second letter and its bogus legal claims, I had a feeling they would choose the shovel. 10 days passed. No letter, no phone call, no response of any kind from Meadowbrook Estates HOA or Pinnacle Community Services. The return receipt came back signed, proving they had received my certified letter. They simply chose not to answer. If they had legitimate documentation, they would have sent it. If this were an honest mistake, they would have apologized. Instead, they went silent. I started researching how to file a complaint with the Virginia Attorney General's office. But before I could finish that process, they decided to escalate in a way I had not anticipated. It was a Saturday morning, 12 days after I mailed my letter. I was on the porch replacing a rotted board when a black SUV pulled up my gravel driveway. Two people got out. A man in his late 50s, with silver hair, wearing a polo shirt with the Meadowbrook Estates logo, and a woman in her 40s, dressed in business casual, carrying a leather folder. They walked toward my porch without being invited. I set down my hammer, pulled out my phone, and pressed record. Virginia is a one-party consent state. The man spoke first. Ms. Gutierrez, I am Dennis Hartley, president of Meadowbrook Estates HOA. This is Monica Vance from Pinnacle Community Services. We are here to discuss your outstanding account and hopefully resolve this matter without further unpleasantness. His tone was friendly, almost condescending. I stayed where I was, leaning against the porch railing. I sent your organization a letter requesting proof of your authority over my property, I said. You did not respond. Monica Vance stepped forward with a practiced smile. There may have been some confusion in the records. These things happen with older properties. But we are prepared to offer a payment plan to help you settle the balance. There is no confusion, I said. The county records are clear. Your HOA ends at the creek. My property is not part of your jurisdiction. Dennis Hartley's smile flickered. Monica Vance did not. She was smoother. Ms. Gutierrez, pursuing this through legal channels will be expensive and time-consuming for everyone. A small payment now could make this all go away. Pressure dressed up as helpfulness. Threats wrapped in reasonableness. I had seen this technique before in my years of handling insurance claims. Create fear, offer an easy exit, and hope the target takes it without fighting. I am not paying for something I do not owe, I said. And I am recording this conversation. If you continue to demand money without legal authority, that is extortion. Leave my property. Dennis Hartley's face hardened. The friendly mask slipped completely. You are making a mistake, he said quietly. We have dealt with stubborn people before. It never ends well for them. Monica Vance touched his arm. A silent signal to stop. They turned and walked back to the SUV. I watched them drive away, then immediately documented everything: license plate, time, summary of the conversation, audio file backed up to multiple locations. That afternoon, I called Earl Patterson. I told him what happened and asked if he knew how to reach any of the other people who had received similar letters. He gave me 3 names. A widow named Lauren Simmons, who lived about a mile north, an elderly couple who had moved away last year, and a young family who had bought a foreclosure property similar to mine. I started with Lauren. She answered on the 3rd ring, and when I explained why I was calling, her voice went quiet. I paid them, she said. $8,000. They said if I did not, they would put a lien on my house and take me to court. I am 72 years old. I could not afford a lawyer. So I paid. I asked if she had ever verified their claims with the county. She had not. No one told her she could. She believed the letters because they looked official and threatened consequences. She could not fight alone. I spent the rest of that day preparing a formal complaint to the Virginia Attorney General's office. Consumer Protection Division. I included both letters I had received. My certified deed, the plat map, the audio recording, and a written summary of my conversation with Lauren Simmons. I noted that at least 3 other property owners had received similar demands, and that at least one had paid under duress. I described the visit from Hartley and Vance, including the threat that things never end well for people who resist. I asked the state to investigate Meadowbrook Estates HOA and Pinnacle Community Services for fraud, extortion, and deceptive trade practices. 3 days later, I received an email confirmation. My complaint had been assigned to an investigator. Someone would be in contact soon. I looked out my kitchen window at the oak trees marking the edge of my land. Lauren Simmons was not the only victim. She was just the one I had found first, and I had a feeling that once the state started pulling at this thread, the whole thing would unravel. 3 weeks after I filed my complaint, I received a phone call from the Virginia Attorney General's office. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Amy Brennan, an investigator with the Consumer Protection Division. Her voice was professional but direct. She told me my complaint had caught their attention, not because it was unusual, but because it was not the only one. Over the past 2 years, her office had received 4 other complaints about Meadowbrook Estates HOA, but none of those complainants had provided the level of documentation I submitted. Most had simply described their frustration and moved on. My file was different. It had county records, certified copies, a recorded conversation, and corroborating testimony from another victim. She asked if I could come to Richmond for an in-person meeting. I told her I would be there the next morning. The Attorney General's office was a gray government building near the state capitol. Amy Brennan met me in a conference room on the 3rd floor. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a legal pad already half-filled with notes. I brought everything I had: the original letters, the county documents, the audio file on a USB drive, and a written statement from Lauren Simmons describing her payment and the threats that preceded it. Amy spread the documents across the table and walked me through what her office had already uncovered. Meadowbrook Estates HOA was legally incorporated in 2009 with jurisdiction over 127 lots within a recorded subdivision. That part was legitimate. What was not legitimate was what started happening in 2018. Beginning that year, the HOA had systematically targeted properties outside its legal boundaries. Older homes, foreclosures, parcels with absentee owners or elderly residents. They sent demand letters, threatened liens, and in many cases collected payments from people who had no idea they were being scammed. Amy's team had identified at least 23 properties that received fraudulent notices. The total amount collected from those properties was estimated at $180,000. And there was another detail that made everything click into place. Dennis Hartley, the HOA president, was also a licensed real estate investor who specialized in buying foreclosed properties at auction. He had access to county records showing which homes were bank-owned, which had recently changed hands, and which owners might be vulnerable to pressure. He was not just running an HOA. He was running a targeted extortion operation using the HOA as cover. I handed Amy the USB drive containing my audio recording. She plugged it into her laptop and listened to the entire conversation without expression. When it ended, she looked at me and nodded. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. His statement about things not ending well for stubborn people, combined with the financial records and the pattern of targeting, gives us enough to move forward with a formal investigation. She explained that, because the scheme involved mailed demands and electronic payments, it potentially qualified as wire fraud, which was a federal offense. Her office was coordinating with the local district attorney and had already reached out to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. This was no longer just a consumer complaint. It was becoming a criminal case. 2 weeks later, the County Board of Supervisors held a public hearing. The Attorney General's office had requested the session to present preliminary findings and gather additional testimony from affected property owners. I was asked to speak, along with Lauren Simmons and 3 other victims who had come forward after local news coverage of the investigation. The hearing room was packed. Residents from Meadowbrook Estates filled one side, many of them looking confused and concerned. On the other side sat a handful of us, the outsiders who had been targeted. Dennis Hartley arrived with a lawyer. Monica Vance sat 2 rows behind him, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Amy Brennan presented the evidence methodically. The plat map showing the HOA's legal boundaries. The list of properties outside those boundaries that had received demand letters. The bank records show payments made under threat. And then she played the audio recording. The room went silent as Hartley's voice filled the speakers. "We have dealt with stubborn people before. It never ends well for them." When it finished, Hartley shot to his feet. "That was a private conversation," he shouted. "She had no right to record me without consent." His lawyer grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back down, but the damage was done. Amy responded calmly. "Virginia is a one-party consent state. Mr. Hartley, the recording is legal, and your reaction just confirmed its authenticity." The county board chair announced that all findings would be forwarded to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. Hartley stormed out of the room with his lawyer trailing behind. Monica Vance slipped out a side door and disappeared. After the hearing, I stood in the hallway waiting for the crowd to thin. Lauren Simmons found me near the elevator. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. She grabbed my hands and held them tight. "Thank you," she said. "I thought I was stupid for paying them. I thought it was my fault for not knowing better." I shook my head. "You were not stupid. You were targeted. They counted on people like you being too scared or too alone to fight back. That is not your fault. That is theirs." She hugged me, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Then she stepped back, wiped her eyes, and nodded. "They are going to pay for this," she said. I looked toward the door where Hartley had made his exit. "Yes," I said. "They are." 4 months after the county board hearing, the legal system finished what I had started. Dennis Hartley was indicted by a federal grand jury on 12 counts of fraud, 8 counts of extortion, and 1 count of wire fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, victim statements, the audio recording that had played in that packed hearing room. His lawyer negotiated a plea deal to avoid a trial that would have been far worse. Hartley pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised probation, and an order to pay $220,000 in restitution to his victims. The man who had threatened that things never end well for stubborn people was now wearing an orange jumpsuit and facing consequences he never expected. Monica Vance was charged separately with conspiracy to commit fraud. She cooperated with investigators in exchange for a lighter sentence. 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from working in property management anywhere in Virginia. Pinnacle Community Services, the company she represented, had its business license revoked by the state. An audit revealed that Meadowbrook Estates was not their only client where questionable billing practices had occurred. 2 other HOAs managed by Pinnacle were now under investigation. The whole operation was crumbling, one piece at a time. And it had all started with a single letter sent to the wrong farmhouse. The restitution fund identified 19 confirmed victims. 4 others had passed away or could not be located. Lauren Simmons was among the first to receive her money back, $8,000 plus interest, returned to her account 5 months after she first told me her story on the phone. I did not receive restitution because I had never paid them a cent, but the Attorney General's office covered my legal expenses, $3,500 for the attorney I had consulted during the investigation. More importantly, they sent me a letter informing me that my complaint had contributed to a new state regulation, effective the following year. All HOAs in Virginia would be required to verify legal jurisdiction over a property before sending any collection notice. They would have to include proof of recorded covenants or annexation agreements with every demand letter. It was a small change in the law, but it meant that what happened to Lauren and the others would be harder to repeat. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, the farmhouse was finally finished. New plumbing, new wiring, fresh paint on every wall. The wraparound porch had been rebuilt with cedar planks that smelled like the lumber yard. The barn still needed work, but it could wait. I had spent 18 months turning a foreclosure into a home, and somewhere along the way, I had also helped dismantle a scheme that had stolen nearly $200,000 from people who did not deserve it. That was not what I planned when I bought this place. But sometimes, life gives you a fight whether you wanted one or not. The only choice is whether you show up. I hosted a small gathering that spring. Nothing fancy. A barbecue on the back porch with burgers and cold drinks. Earl Patterson came, wearing a flannel shirt despite the warm weather, complaining about the music I picked. Lauren Simmons came with her daughter, who thanked me 3 times before I told her to stop. 2 other victims from the case showed up, people I had only met at the hearing but who now felt like neighbors in a different sense. And near the end of the afternoon, a young couple walked up the driveway. They lived in Meadowbrook Estates. They had seen the news coverage and wanted to apologize on behalf of the decent people in their neighborhood who had no idea what their HOA president had been doing. I told them they had nothing to apologize for. They stayed for a burger anyway. As the sun went down, I stood at the edge of my property and looked toward the creek. The oak trees were full of new leaves. The water was high from the spring rains. On the other side, the rooftops of Meadowbrook Estates caught the last light of the day. The boundary was still there. It had always been there. But now everyone knew exactly what it meant. I bought this farmhouse looking for peace. I found a battle instead. But some battles are worth fighting, and some victories do more than protect what is yours. They remind everyone watching that the rules apply to those who think they are above them, that silence is not consent, and that the right piece of paper, in the right hands, can bring down anyone.